Okay, so let's talk about configuring new features and updates for Office. And this is a fairly lengthy and complex topic. So there are two different methods of local installations with the new version of Office. For businesses that have Office 365 subscriptions, they'll be using the new Click to Run method. This method employs a streaming and virtualization technology that reduces the time required to install and helps run multiple versions on the same computer. The details on this technology are a little hard to find, but it appears to be some sort of just-in-time technology, or at least very similar. Whether users download Office from Office 365 or whether you deploy Office through the Office Deployment Tool, they're both considered click-to-run implementations. The Office Deployment Tool, or ODT, is a method of creating an XML configuration file and then running setup or pushing the install through group policy or SCCM to users. It doesn't use an MSI. The only Office 365 MSI that's supplied by Microsoft is the Windows Installer package, and this is available for home and personal use as an offline installer. This installation method will not work with the update settings in this lesson, but chances are you won't run into it in a business environment. Microsoft maintains two major update channels meant for broad distribution. The first is Current Channel, which receives new features and updates every month, along with security and non-security updates as well. Non-security updates in this context relate to minor bug fixes and improvements to stability. This is the default update setting for Office 365 Business, which is the local install version that comes with the small business license offerings. As a reminder, it's the local install that doesn't include Microsoft Access or Skype. The deferred channel only receives 3 major updates per year or an update every 4 months on a scheduled basis. This update is based on the current update from 4 months prior to the release. The concept's a little tricky, but we'll go over this diagram in a minute. Even though the deferred channel only receives a major update every 4 months, it does continue to receive monthly security updates and non-security updates, but only for 8 months, and I'll explain this in a minute as well. The last thing on the slide to mention is the first release program for the deferred channel. Since there's a 4-month lag between when the current channel update is made available and when the deferred channel update based on that release is made available, that gives businesses 4 months to test and validate. Participants in the first release program will have access to that deferred channel update for that 4 months preceding the major release. Okay, so let's go into this diagram to explain further. First, we'll say that deferred channel release number 0 was just made available in October. The next deferred channel release, DC1, will be available in 4 months, which is February. So this DC1 will be based on the October current channel update, meaning that every time a DC is released, it's based on the current release from 4 months ago. So now we have 4 months between October and February to test this DC1 candidate. Now, Microsoft doesn't call it a candidate because it isn't just possible that it will be released, it's definite. But what's really happening is that the participants of the first release program in your organization will have access to this DC1 update between October and February for validation and testing. This unreleased DC1 update will continue to get monthly security and non-security updates, but what it will not receive is new features or major updates that are released in the current channel after October. So once February comes around, the DC1 is made available for regular deferred channel users. If your clients are in this channel and set up for automatic updates, they'll get this. At this point, the next DC candidate, DC2, based on February's current release channel, is made available to first release participants for testing and validation, with wide distribution scheduled in June, and so forth. The bulk of users should be in the deferred channel update program, unless you have a need for them to get monthly updates, although it's really your preference. Even in the deferred channel program, users will continue to get monthly security and non-security updates, but only for 8 months. That means if your users are not receiving automatic updates, or if you deploy updates manually, and you skip 2 deferred channel releases and fall 2 versions behind, your users will no longer receive security updates, which is a huge concern considering Office is one of the most targeted applications for malware. So in order to stay safe and supported, you must make sure that users are getting their deferred channel update deployments. Okay, so I hope that made sense. If not, watch the rest of the lesson and then come back to this slide if needed. Also, feel free to leave a comment in the discussion forum. There is also a first release program for the current channel for those users who want new features and updates even earlier than the users in the current channel who receive them monthly. This program is generally referred to as the Office Insider program, and it comes in 2 flavors, Insider Slow and Insider Fast. Insider Slow is generally for users who want to test and validate new features ahead of the current release. It's best for power users who want access to early builds, but builds that are nevertheless supported. The Insider Fast participants are updated with builds that are not officially supported and in beta. They should not be used for any business purposes and only if the user wants to volunteer to test and provide feedback to Microsoft to improve Office functionality at an early point in the potential release cycle. The Fast Track has its own agreement and does not conform to the Microsoft use policy for Office, so you cannot be guaranteed support or functionality. There are 3 methods of setting the channel and release preferences for your Office users. The first method is to set the default settings for downloads of Office from the Office 365 admin portal. As mentioned before, the Business and Business Premium accounts will default to current, while the Enterprise or Pro Plus accounts will default to deferred. By default, nobody in any organization will be part of the first release or Office Insider programs. If you choose to deploy Office via the ODT, either using setup.exe or SCCM, you can configure the update channel and release preferences within the XML configuration file. Regardless of which method you use to deploy, either letting your clients download from the portal directly or deploying with the Office deployment tool, either one of these only affects the initial install. If you change the Office 365 settings in the admin console or change the XML file, it won't affect any already installed versions of Office. You can redeploy or re-download Office and the new settings will take effect, but neither of these methods can modify the update channel or release preferences without going through the install again. In order to just change the settings, you have to use Group Policy, and there's an administrative template available from Microsoft that has a setting in the software section of the computer policy where you can make changes to the update settings for users with existing installs. The template actually just makes changes to the registry values in HKey Local Machine, Software, Policies, Microsoft Office 16.0 Common Office Update. Instead of using Group Policy, you can also directly make the changes to the registry as long as you know what you're doing. The channel and release preferences will change the next time Office attempts to check for updates, but can be forced by manually checking for updates in the File Account menu option in any of the Microsoft Office applications, and we'll show this at the end of the lesson. Now, removing these group policy settings or registry entries, or specifying a value that is not recognized, will revert Office to the update settings that were set during the installation. In regards to changing the default update channel for downloads via the portal, this is changed in the Office 365 Admin Center under the Settings, Services and Add-ins, Software Download settings. Here you can also set what applications are available for download and disable the availability of others completely. Again, this only affects the installations at the time of download, not what happens after the installation has been completed. The release preferences are set in Settings, Organization Profile, Release Preferences. Here you could specify first release for everybody or first release just for specific users. If the channel is deferred, then first release means first release for deferred. If the channel is set to current, then first release means Office Insider Slow. Office Insider Fast is not available as a download or installation via the portal. It has to be set via the Office deployment tool or via Group Policy once installed. There are some additional settings that can be configured either through the Office deployment tool or Group Policy. These include enabling or disabling automatic updates, which forces you to push updates manually, also in changing the install path, and this allows you to specify a local path so that users will install updates from your on-prem server instead of the internet. For large organizations, this makes sense so that the same files aren't downloaded hundreds or thousands of times over the internet for each individual. Also, there's a setting that you can use to either allow or disable SCCM to manage Office 365 clients. Here are the actual settings for each method, and notice that the terminology for group policy and registry settings is slightly different than the Office deployment tool settings or the terms that we've used so far. For instance, to change a user to deferred, you can set the value to business. Also, instead of using first release deferred, the value is validation. This is most likely a holdover from the previous incarnation of the deferred update channel, which was called current batch for business. If you're interested in knowing more about the Office roadmap and tracking any particular features or bug fixes, you can do so at the Office 365 roadmap website located at fasttrack.microsoft.com/roadmap. Okay, let's take a quick look at some of this in action.